The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound, and today we will be answering a listener email. And we have a question from Kristen, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona. Ooh, I haven't been to Phoenix in a long time. And Kristen asks, the House is considering nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and food stamps. The left is losing its mind. But can't we agree that there are abuses of the system? Shouldn't hard-working taxpayers get a break, and the lazy and illegals in this country get off their asses? That's the question's word, not mine. Their backsides. And get to work? Isn't it time we got a handle on our country's finances? Mark, Scott?
I have a broad statement, and I'll say it and just be quiet and let Mark take it from there. The main difference between conservatives and liberals, between Republicans and Democrats, seems to me that the Republicans are incredibly worried that somebody might be trying to get away with something, that somebody out there is getting Medicaid who doesn't deserve it, and that liberals are more afraid that somebody who really needs it is going to lose it. And I really do think that is the biggest difference between the mentality of liberals and the mentality of conservatives.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before. Republicans tell you what to fear to encourage you to do something. Democrats want to make you feel guilty to encourage you to do something. Are there instances of fraud in Medicare or in Medicaid? We're talking Medicaid here. We're not talking Medicare. We're talking Medicaid. And in things like food stamps, SNAP, now that it's known as. Yes, absolutely. There's going to be cases of fraud. That's a systems issue. If you're going to correct the system, then I think you're on the right track. I mean, if you believe that there's fraud being committed by whomever, and I'm sure that it's not as widespread. If you ask, again, something to make you afraid of it, or as Scott just pointed out, afraid that somebody's getting away with something. They're trying to make it like half the people on this are doing it illegally. It's not the way it works. It is not the way it works. But you correct the system. I mean, if you have that much insight as to the fraud that's being committed, correct the system, and that can be done. It does not take cutting money to the program. You will be able to, though, if you correct the system, maybe move money around to use it more efficiently. Yes, I agree. I would love it if we could spend money efficiently. We've talked about this numerous times. But these programs here are not where you need to look. Where you need to look is the Department of Defense, who have historically had, we've mentioned this before, $300 screwdrivers, $400 toilet seats, because the contractors are taking advantage of the system. Fix the system. Instead of having an almost $1 trillion budget toward defense, hey, if we fix the system and actually paid Home Depot price of $29.99 for a toilet seat, look at all the money you just saved. So there are places to do this. And yes, there are programs that could be put in place to correct this idea of there being fraud. Are you going to correct all the fraud? Hell no. We can't correct all the fraud that's happening in the Congress itself. I mean, no, we can't even, you can't do that. And that's pretty out there in the open, and nobody seems to care. We had a recent podcast that was on this recording session talking about insider trading from the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Why is it that you're Why is that not as big a deal as this? Why are you always beating up on the poor? And the thing that gets me is if you look at there's a great graph, and I'll put it up in the description, of those places that mostly depend on Medicaid. It's all red. These are Republican areas, poor places. So it's just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And again, I see the bill. However, I did see today the Freedom Caucus doesn't like it, didn't pass it. It got out of committee, and I think it was Chip Roy this morning said that the bill looks worse today than it looked yesterday. So who knows if they're actually going to get this passed? But it does show once again the inability of the Republican Party to come together and agree on anything. Some of them say you're not going far enough. Some are going to say we should cut $2 trillion to these programs. Some are saying, my state uses this a lot. Maybe we're going a little too far. Maybe cut $500 million from it or $1 billion from it. And then you've got those that say, yeah, this is the right amount. So this is why the Republicans are having such a hard time, because a lot of these Republicans do realize how much this is shooting their own constituency in the foot. And I think that's something that really is important for us to remember. And that's why this is taking so long to get things through. Nancy Pelosi, you could hate her, you could love her, I don't care. She was able to get things through Congress.
Yeah, she knew how to count.
She could do math. And she could also frame the question in a way that even those that might be on the fence or leaning as opposition, she could get them on board. She was very, very good. And I will say this, Mitch McConnell was always good at this. He knew how to take the temperature. He knew how to maneuver. He was again, like him, dislike him, I don't care. Fact is that as a politician, he was pretty good. He knew how to do the job. Whether it was a really great way that he was doing it or not is irrelevant. The fact is that Mitch McConnell was a master politician. And right now, we don't have any of those. We just don't. Mike Johnson isn't it. He keeps saying, "Oh yeah, this is going to go through," and then the next thing you know, he runs into a fence. You know it's bad when people like the senator from, help me out here, Scott, said he was an eye doctor, but he created his own board.
From
his father was
Rand Paul.
Rand Paul, right?
Paul, yeah. He's a board certified ophthalmologist or something like that,
yep.
And he created the board.
Yeah. I mean, when they start, even as screwy as they are, when they start seeing some of these things and saying, well, wait a minute, now hold on now for a minute, you know that there's a problem. So, yeah, I've seen where they want to cut that amount of money, but will they be able to do it? Good question. Remember the first promise that Trump had in his first term? I'm going to overturn Obamacare. He had both houses of Congress, and he couldn't do it.
John McCain.
Yep.
Give him the big thumbs down.
Yep.
So here's another aspect of this that I think is very, very underrated. Was it Kristen from Phoenix? You're focusing on the wrong people. Medicaid, when there's fraud, it's generally providers who commit the fraud, not the people who get it. Now, that's a fairly big statement, and it's not always true, because there are people who don't have Medicaid but get Medicaid cards from a friend or something along those lines, and obtain services that they need and have Medicaid pay for it improperly. Happens, right? But for the most part, Medicaid is very efficient. 95% of the Medicaid outlays in 2024, 579, let's call it $580 billion in federal payments, were done properly. 95%. 5% were improper, not fraud, improper, 5%. And of those, about 80% of them were simply not sufficient documentation or missing some kind of step. Again, not by the individual who's seeking healthcare, but by the place that they go to for it. And so your focus here on individuals rather than healthcare providers, HMOs, organizations that provide the financing for people's medical needs, those are the ones that you really need to be looking at. And there may be no better example of that than the story of Rick Scott, who I will say he's a senator from Florida, for those of you who don't remember. He was the CEO of a hospital company, a company that owned many hospitals, and was involved in one of the largest convictions for Medicare fraud in the country's history. When he was the chief executive of this company, he became wealthy. This is how he got his wealth. And after he left the company, it was discovered that the company had been committing fraud. He didn't pay any kind of penalty or price for it. He was gone already, took his money and went elsewhere. But the company got fined, and I think it was 14 felonies or something like that. So I don't think that your focus, Kristen from Arizona, is in the right place. It's not illegal immigrants who are getting Medicaid. That's the big problem. It's people who, providers who overcharge for services, for example, or who provide a service that's not covered by Medicaid, but saying that what they actually did was a service that is provided by Medicaid, and that's fraud, right? So let's say you get a procedure done and, your dermatologist, let's say, gets rid of some wrinkles around your eyes, but they say that they were scraping what looked like a cancerous mole off your body instead. That's the kind of fraud that mostly happens. So this idea, and by the way, Rick Scott just 2 days ago was talking about Medicaid and didn't seem to understand the idea that most of the people who get Medicaid are children or seniors, and most of the people who get Medicaid can't work because they're either too young or too old, or have some kind of disability that prevents them from working. So it's, I don't think that the Republicans have their heart in the right place. And I think they're blaming victims, blaming the poor for things that are not the fault of the poor. If you want to find out where the fraud is, you need to look at the providers and the payer, the people who, are ripping off the system.
Right. And it's also important to remember, and again, a lot of people get very confused by this, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. So Medicare is that what you pay into every paycheck. And that's if you're 65 and older, or if you have a certain disability, you can go on Medicare, which is an insurance. Does it pay? Yeah, it does. But most people, even after the age of 65, still have to get some sort of supplementary insurance to help cover some of the costs that it doesn't. Medicaid, on the other hand, is actually a joint venture between the federal government and the state. And the state basically, there's rules that the federal government imposes that the state has to do, but the state has their own rules that are beyond what what the federal government tells them they have to do. And so I don't hear the states complaining about this. I really don't hear. This is the federal government saying, well, we're going to do cutting because there's this type of fraud. Well, again, the state, so you're blaming the state and their administration of this? It just seems, and then, again, Kristen from Arizona, hopefully it isn't Kristen Cinema. I don't know what the issue is with the people. Once again, we talk about an idea of the system. Medicaid is a system between the state and the federal government. The federal government does put in money. So does the state. And somebody manages it. That's perfectly fine, too. But if there's going to be fraud, isn't it the managers that you have to really look at? And Scott's exactly right. Most of the fraud isn't by the people that are on it. It's really by the people, that are providing the services, those hospitals. Just,
And look, if it's 95% effective,
yeah, really,
which it seems to be according to the Kaiser Foundation, why would this be where you're looking to make budget cuts? This is a system that's working pretty well, really well.
Right. And you can correct the fraud by correcting the system. Start correcting. If you believe it's out there and running rampant, then okay, then fix the system. Because that's where the problem is. You're talking about people that are 65 and older. And in the case of Medicaid, you're talking about children. For those people on Medicare that are 65 and older or have disabilities that qualify for them for Medicare, Medicaid pays for those that are low income for things like home nursing care. Because guess what? If they need home nursing care, it means they can't go out and work. They're housebound. So it does pay for all the right things. I can't see why anybody would be, try to make it like there's this great conspiracy out there that this is like a rampant, ripping you off. But hey, so that probably wasn't the answer Christy wanted, but it's as truthful as we could be about it. So hopefully we answered that.
Yeah, so thank you, Kristen. I'm sorry I don't have anything to contribute, but we appreciate your question, and we appreciate your listening and spending some time with us on the Nova Society. And thank you to all our listeners, and thank you for all your questions, and do take care, and we will see you again next time.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!